Hello there, and welcome to my Arty Corner here on YouTube. My name's Angela Porter, and I'm best known for my grown-up colouring books. Adult colouring books just sounds so wrong, but my grown-up colouring books, particularly for Creative Haven and the Colour Me series. But my YouTube channel is about encouraging you to draw, to have a go at it, to try things out, to see what happens, and to explore and experiment with patterns. And I'm all about stylized drawings and whimsy and abstract stuff, and some lettering thrown in, but not too often, because I'm not so sure about lettering still with me. But that's a different story, which I may touch on in a moment. But first, I'd just like to say thank you to everybody who's subscribed to my channel. I appreciate each and every one of you so much. And thank you also for the thumbs up for videos, for the lovely comments, and also when you share work with me that you've done. It's lovely to see. I absolutely love it. And I also find it really lovely when you give me a shout out as well. I appreciate that so much, and share so that others who perhaps would find what I'm doing here valuable can come along and make use of it, or, you know, gain something from my videos. So thank you very much for that. Okay, what you can see in front of me underneath my camera here is a whole pile of stuff. Yesterday's little drawing is here. Little artwork, my collage with drawing, and I do like this. I do. I did something not similar, but yet similar yesterday evening. Do you think I can find it? I've put it somewhere and it has vanished. It'll turn up eventually. But with the patterns underneath, I actually put some white gesso over the top because they were a bit vibrant and I wanted to knock them back, and so I distressed them and then added gesso. I could add gesso to the green leafy bits, but I'm going to leave them as they are. But I actually quite like this kind of thing, where I've got some lettering in there, where I've made use of collaged papers and so on. But then I can also draw. And I am going to work on, I'm trying to work on accepting a style of lettering that suits me, or accepting that my lettering is good enough. It's not easy at the moment. I'm working on it. But I used here yesterday, I made some background papers or coloured papers, collage papers, using Paper Artsy's fresco paints, and I made more last night. This is an early one. Did this about a week ago, and I just did some pattern there and I've gessoed that. Let me pop those out the way in the hopes that I won't lose them. So this was some of the paper I used yesterday, but I've added gesso, white gesso over the top again to knock the colours back that little bit, because they were getting all a bit vibrant. And I've got one type in here, I've got this one, and it's still very, very vibrant, but you should have seen it before the white gesso. A bit too much for me, but I've got some lovely things going on. I mean, you're going to see a number of very similar. I think these were papers I showed yesterday, but I've gessoed them. And you can see the colours coming through, but there's this white chalky layer over the top, and it just feels more distressed, aged, you know, dusty and old, faded almost. And I really like this. I like this particular set of colours. Now, I'll never remember what the colours were I used, but that's no problem, because the part of the fun of this is playing around with it. I like these ones as well. This one here with the pink and this yellowy green in. And again, this one was really quite too dark for me, for my liking, but the white gesso has really helped. This one really does look like we've put a skim of something on there. I've got to find some old credit cards or store cards or something to use to scrape gesso over. And paint as well. So that's on my list of things to do. But I've got a really interesting array of colours here. Look at that one. This is like I think that's a mint green, and this is sort of like a soft pinky colour. And where they overlap or because I let one colour dry before I add the next. I don't want them to mix, because green and pink, when you mix them, will make mud. But when they layer over one another, you get a different, you know, you get the colour showing through a little bit, and it's just so lovely. No rhyme or reason. I'm not trying to paint anything. I'm just trying to get an interesting textures. I've got some gold and metallics on some, so there's a hint of gold on this one, which even shows through the gesso. And there's another one of these pinky ones. It's got some yellow in it as well as the greeny colour. And there's some paper showing through, and I'm fine with that. So I've got all of these here, and they're going to go into my stash because I want to make use of them. These are distress inked backgrounds, and I collaged some paper on them. I actually used this one, but I started gessoing them because I wanted to add gesso over these lined papers, because I'm hoping I might do some hand lettering on these, and I'll most probably completely ignore the lines but leave them there as a background texture. But you can see where I've added, perhaps on this one, where, this is the one, look at that, couldn't see it for looking. I did some little, you know, like, almost like a Tripoli there with triangles on the top. On the bottom I filled them in, but they were much darker than that. I've used water to bleach them out, and then I decided, right, I haven't bleached them out enough. I kept adding water and bleaching more and more, so I gessoed, and it's sort of like faded into the background. How dim am I? Yeah, I've been awake since before 5 o'clock. It's now just after 10. It's 10:15 in the morning here in the UK. So I've been awake for 5 hours, and I'm beginning to feel dozy, and I need to do some work today. So I've got these good to go for whatever I want to use them with. I may use them as they are. It may come to the point where I go, right, that's it. I'm chopping this into a bit and I'm going to use that in something. I don't know yet, because the other thing I wanted to have a look at was this page. This is in my new lettering sketchbook. I had started a new lettering sketchbook that was a big square one, but it's too big to scan in. It's too unmanageable because it's, rather than being wire bound, it's case bound, so it's like a proper book. I really am not sensible with sketchbooks. Wire bound, I can take the page out as long as I tear carefully, and then I can slot it back in. It's a bit like disc bound systems, and it works for me. But I started last night as I was settling to bed, just thinking, what am I doing? Where am I going? And I put just letter. The question was about lettering, hand lettering, and then practice and experiments, and then I did some patterns and so on. And then this morning I woke up and, you know, various other things came to mind, like, you know, I've got to check my spelling because experiment is spelled correctly. It's just that I've arranged my letters in a weird way. And then just everything here just appeared like, is collage a good style for me? Is this working for me? Is this where I want to go? Is it what I want to do? What do I like about it? So I put here all kinds of things, you know, sort of like a pattern, mixed media, colour, variation. It's fun to do. I've got pattern down there, I can use patterns. It ends up with a distress feel. It's a particular aesthetic that I like. It's sort of like, it's pretty grunge rather than mucky grunge, I suppose. It's been distressed or, you know, worn, weather worn looking. And I quite like that. You know, if you look at something like this, the colours are really quite delicate and pretty and, you know, floral and so on. You know, they just suit me. Even this one, even though it's a bit, you know, the colours are a bit darker, and you've got these greens that aren't necessarily my favourite kinds of greens. I prefer the bluey greens, but well, mostly. But it sort of works. It looks distressed, and it looks old, and it looks aged, and sort of in a new kind of way. But it's so much here. You know, there's so much, like I get to make my own coloured papers, my own pattern papers. It's ticking through my head, can I create pattern papers in colour that I can scan in and use? Or should I make papers like this that I fill with pattern, and then I can use them in a collagey kind of way, you know, tear them up, use them as backgrounds and so on. Thinking about lettering styles, you know, do I want to just base things on my hand lettering, or am I going to try and get a lot more fancy schmancy? Hand lettering handwriting. Handwriting is where you just write. I mean, there are examples of handwriting here. This is some handwriting where I've just written down my thoughts as they come to me. In other places, my thoughts were slow enough that I could focus on how I form the letters mostly, and get them down. Or when it's a list like here, it was one word at a time, so the word came to mind and I could write it. And then, other things come to mind as as examples here of what I've done, what I'm thinking about doing, and then the question of styles in art. How many of you struggle with that? What's my style? Have I got a style? Have I got an artistic voice? The simple answer is yes, we all have. But the complicated answer is we may not always be either happy with it, or we might not think it's good enough, or that it's of value because other people are working in the same way, or because we compare our work to other people's work and think, oh, why am I bothering? They're much better than me. Where we look with our eyes and our minds in a biased way based on how we feel about ourselves and what we think about ourselves, what our past experiences of life are, and so on. It's ever so complicated, isn't it? It really, really is. And I think that part of me is beginning to think that all this experimenting and trying things out is part of my inverted commas style, my artistic voice, because no matter what I do, there is still that stamp. This is Angela Porter who has lettered this, or has drawn these patterns, or has drawn these motifs, has done this, because what I draw is what I like. I do love lettering. I love illuminated manuscripts. I love to see different kinds of types and fonts. And I'm struggling with the idea whether this is something I can manage to incorporate into my art or not. It's something I've tried again and again and again over the years and got nowhere with. So what am I going to do today? Because I will talk about this forever, but I just wanted to throw some things out there for you to consider and think about. So let's choose one of my lovely papers here. And I am going to choose one that I really, really like. And I am not going to hoard papers. I like that one. That's the one I wanted to use. I really, really like this one, and I didn't want to choose papers that would sit in my stash forever and never be used, because that's such a shame, because I then wouldn't have to make any more, would I? So this is 21 centimetres, so that's about 8.25 inches by it's about 9.5 centimetres, well, to be precise, 9.6 centimetres wide, which is about 3.75 inches. I'm just going to cut this down to 10.5 centimetres, or just over 4 inches tall. Is it? Yeah, just about 10.5 centimetres, just about 4.25 inches tall. And then I've got 2 pieces, so I can keep a piece, because it's nice to, sometimes it's just nice to do things. And I'm just going to use this to draw on, and I think I'm going to draw on it with black, because, well, it's Saturday morning and I haven't done any drawing in black for a while. What I am going to do though, hopefully, if I can see my lines here, there we go, that'll do, is I am going to draw a border around this, because I don't want to draw right up to the edge. As you know me, I do love a coloured background to draw on. I really, really do. It's just something so pleasant to do. It breaks the white page, as it were, the blank page, but it also gives us it gives you a sort of like feel or a kind of an emotion, I suppose, to go with this. And with this, I can see almost shapes of people here, but we're not going with people. I'm just leaving it as it is. I'm going to draw on the background. Seeing objects in random patterns and shapes is what our brain does. It pattern matches. Our brains are quite lazy. And so if something looks like something, we know what it is, even if we don't know what it is. Well, our brain will tell us, well, it looks like that, so it must be that. It seeks for patterns because that's how it orders the words. And this thing, seeing objects in shapes, like looking at clouds and thinking, oh, that's a dragon, that's a mermaid, oh, that looks like a cat's face, is something called pareidolia. Pareidolia? Pareidolia, I think it's spelt. And it's just how our brains work is just fascinating. So I'm going to draw some seed pods. I think I'll do a little design on here. I want to use some tangle patterns because, well, we like tangle patterns, don't we? So let's start with some good old Muka at the bottom. I'm using an 03 Unipin pen here from Uniball Mitsubishi Pen Company, I think it is. And I know that the fact I've got gesso on here and paint on here is likely to muck up the nib, but you know, these are the sacrifices we make. I think this is the 03 that has got the weird nib on it anyway. So I'm just going to put some Mukas here. Like so. So I can't believe that we're into July already. And I've got to get some work done, and I'm here going, no, I'm just going to do this. Honestly, bonkers does not begin to describe me at the moment, but yeah. So I've got some there, and I think I'd like to put something here. So I think I could put I think I will. Pop a little shell here, just like that, like a little ammonite. And I'm going to just use an 01 pen to put some lines in like that, because I think I can. Okay, so my seed pods are going to be interesting, I think. I'm going to start with the inside part of them, which is going to go like this. And then we are going to have an outer part, which is going to go like this. And then like this. I'm leaving a gap at the top there. See? Left a gap. And then I'm going to put some little shapes like that. So it's like a V and then connected, well, it's an M shape, isn't it? But the M is really sort of like leaning over on either side and curling back on itself. And then in the middle, instead of straight lines for the seed pod, I'm going to put in that kind of shape, I think. So I think that would work quite nicely, and I am going to fill the centre here with some seeds. This is going to be in a perk kind of fashion. And I'll come back with my 01 pen in a moment. So I'm just adding some leaves here. So these are like Flux, or one of the versions of the Tangle pattern Flux. So I start by drawing curve shape, down, round and back again. So I'm just going to pop another one in on the other side. They don't have to be precisely the same shape or anything, they just need to be present. I'm going to use my 01 pen just to pop a border around there, because it feels right when I do that. Okay, so I think that'll be quite nice. So let's do another one up here. So this is the inner part, and I am going to, it's a backward S I've drawn. You could do it the other way round, as in an S shape, it doesn't matter. Like this. I'll pop the seeds in at the middle. Like so. Then we're going to do the outer layer like so. And then I'm going to pop these little bits on the top. And I'm going to put the stem in. And I'm making the stem wobbly. A little bit wibbly and wobbly here, rather than completely straight. And I'm going to put some of these leaves in then. I'm going to try to be aware and conscious, mindful that this ink may take a little while to dry, because I'm drawing on either acrylic paint or gesso or both. And it's not absorbent in the same way that paper is. But the ink looks really black on the surface because the pigments aren't sinking into the paper either. So I'll just pop a little leaf there and perhaps a little one there. Once again, I will go back. I'll use my 01 here just to fill in these little gaps. And then to add that kind of border around it. And I like odd numbers, so we're going to have another one up here. So you can see how I've put an S shape in the middle there. And then just doubling it up. Connecting it at the top and bottom is a nice thing to do, I think. But again, you don't have to. If it doesn't happen that way for you, don't stress, because it will be fine. Okay, so let's do the outer border. So I'm starting from where I want the gap this time, because sometimes it's a bit hit and miss if I do it the other way round. Put the little top on. And here I'm going to put my stem here as if it's a continuation of this one. It saves getting too many stems, getting confused at the bottom. And I'm all for trying not to confuse myself too much, let alone anybody else as they look at it. So like so, like so. Just keep going. Some of these aren't very well coloured in. I'm holding my pen at a strange angle in the hope that you can see what I'm doing. And that's not helping me. So on this one, the last thing I need to do here is to use my 01 pen to pop that little border in. And I'm beginning to think perhaps I'll pop lines in like this. just to perhaps add some texture in and fill that space in. So what I'm doing is I'm starting at the bottom of the line and going out and sort of like copying how I created that S shape in the middle, but just creating these lines for shadows, which is quite nice. I think that works. I think it does. Okay, I'd like to do something along the bottom here, and I think I'm going to do something that's a little bit different here than adding more Muka. I am going to add a bit of a ground there so they look like they're growing out of something. But here I think I'm going to do something that perhaps is a little bit on the different side, possibly. That one's connected there, so I'm not too worried if that... There we go. And I think with this one I might just give a little one there. And this one perhaps another little bit there. So it's almost like I've got these splitting and joining and creating a grid work. This is something I've used often in art to fill spaces in, where I don't necessarily want to draw more of the same, but something a little bit different that's got some interest to it. I think this here would be quite nice joined like that. And I am adding a little bit of weight to the lines where they join, cross over, so that it looks a bit more like they're stained glass windows, that kind of thing. And I quite like that. There's space here for quite a bit of stuff, and I'm not really sure what I'd want to do there, if anything. So I am going to leave this. I'm not going to leave it. I'm going to get my heat gun out, and I'm going to use my heat gun to dry the ink off. When I say heat gun, it's a heat tool. It's a craft heat tool. It gets very hot, but it's not as noisy as the heat guns. So it's a handy little thing to have in my kit, my craft kit, for eventualities like this. Right, that's nice. That's all dry now, so I'm not going to smudge that. And once it's dried, it's permanent. So I have got here, I'm going to find a brush. I say I'm going to find a brush. I'll be back in a moment. I've got to go and get a pot of water. I haven't got any water. And there we are back. Water, brushes, and a couple of Inktense pencils. Inktense are a bit tricky here to get colours that will go with the background, but I'll see what happens. I'm going to pick them off the tip of the brush, I think, so I don't have more than I want. I've got a couple of different sized brushes. I've got this one, which is an 01, a 0. And I like these ones, the Aquafine rounds or the Pro Art spotters. I like the springiness of the hair. It's synthetic hair as well. Okay, so for my seed pods, I thought I'd rather like to use perhaps some red purple in here. Actually, I think that was a good choice. And I can add just that tint or hint of colour. And once it's dry, it will remain permanent. This is why I've chosen the Inktense pencils, because I can layer up colour. And they will pretty much stick to anything. I say pretty much, within reason. But let's just have a little bit more on this side now. And I have got it going out into the edge. So I am going to go with that, I think, eventually. Like here. Just Just add a little bit more on this side. It's more to add some colour to help them to lift up from the background than it is to do, you know, I will add shadow or change the intensity of the colour just to help with giving these a sense of volume as well. I find it useful to lift the colour directly off the pencils this way when I don't want so much, because Inktense pencils are so, well, intense in colour. A little bit goes a very long way. And here I don't want anything that's too dark, too intense, because I don't want to overpower the background. I want the background to still be there because it's so nice. I like this. So I'll let that dry for a moment, and I'll tell you where else I'm going to use this. Is on my shell. I'm going to put some close to this edge. Yeah, and I've got some areas a bit darker than others, but that is what it is today. In fact, I was hoping to keep the those. I can always come back and add colour to those separation, but I do want to put some right along this edge as well. Perhaps a little bit darker where these would be in shadow particularly. There would be shadows on things. You get shadows on the edge. You need it a little bit darker on each edge just to help it feel that it's further away and has a bit of shadow on it. And where things overlap, it's the simplest kind of adding shadows. You can add reflected highlights and so on if you want to get really complicated, but as I'm doing this, almost like a formula, I'm not going to worry too much. Now I've got colour going in the middle, and that's okay, but I am going to go back here and pick up just a bit more colour, because I really want to get that feeling that this is very rounded, and that can be done in this way. The darker the shadows, the less light the highlights have to be, if that makes sense. So that'll do for now. Okay, so this colour, if you're interested, it's red violet, and I'm letting these dry before I come back with any more Inktense, because once they dry they won't move. For these, I haven't got anything that's this kind of minty green colour, but this green aquamarine may just look okay for the mucas, especially if I remember to not add too much colour for the most part, but where I want shadows I add that little bit more. It's okay, this is okay, but it's not the exact colour I'd like. It's a bit, it is what it is though, and I'm going to work with that no matter what. Might see me moving over to my paper towel, because I'll use that to blot off when I've got too much colour or water on the brush. So I'm using the darker colour here first, just to get that, then I'll go back while this is still wet. The advantage of using this this surface that's been painted with the fresco paints and gesso is that the Inktense doesn't dry as quickly or isn't absorbed in as quickly, so you've got more working time with it. So on paper it does tend to stick an awful lot, and getting smooth results I find incredibly difficult, because I do like smooth colours. Alcohol markers could be interesting to use on this. I've not used alcohol markers with the fresco paints, but I do know that with gesso, if it's applied a little bit on the splotchy side, shall we say, the uneven side, then it can be it can have an interesting effect, shall we say. And I quite like those interesting effects we can get. And these colours do fade back as they dry as well. All water soluble products do. It's to do with how light reflects in the damp medium, as opposed to it dry and flat on the paper. As more light gets reflected from it. I think that's the theory. My science brain tells me that sounds right, but my logical brain goes, Angela, how do you know that? Where have you learnt that? And the answer is, I can't remember. So I don't always trust my knowledge. So that's quite nice. That's a nice little bit of contrast there. I'm going to go back to these seed pods because I do want to intensify these colours a little bit more, especially where I want some shadows, which is at the base of these and on the outside edge perhaps. So I'm adding more colour now at the bottom, but also around the edges here. I'm trying to keep a highlighted spot in the centre. Again, it won't be as noticeable once this dries, but to be honest with you, I prefer to do this a little at a time rather than add too much, which I then can't remove at a later time. Once it's dry, it'll be fixed. And I'm not trying to get a very smooth kind of movement of my brush strokes. It's more the impression, because if I do the same with each of them, it will look consistent. That's my theory on it all anyway. And sometimes it's nice to add that extra bit of texture, I think, with a brush. Right, so I am beginning to get that highlight forming there. It's nice to know that as I'm adding water and working with the colour, the black ink isn't moving, the pen isn't moving, so I know that has fixed to either the gesso or the paint or both. Well, it's both actually, because it's not moving anywhere. And I know that I didn't apply gesso over the whole of these papers, just in places, just to add some variation and to tone, say, just to knock the colour back a bit, just to make it that little bit lighter, because I didn't want it as dark as some of them were. And I could use, white gel pen to draw on them or something else, but though I've done that, it's fun, but I really wanted it so I could use it in multiple ways. If I ever need darker papers, I can always make them, because there are some paper artsy fresco paints that are really quite intense in colour, and they could so here I really am getting a lot more colour here, so little by little, and then I'll work out how dark I want them here. Just overspilled there, and this is really useful because with Inktense ordinarily you wouldn't be able to do that on paper, I don't think, not as easily. So there's a huge advantage for me doing this. I'm learning as I'm going along. I hadn't realised that would be the case. But and this ability to be able to work in layers so I can increase the intensity of the colour is very useful for me as well, because sometimes I add colour to things and I realise afterwards that it's a bit insipid, or or it's a bit dark, whereas this way I can work with it until I get it exactly how I'd like it to be, which is lovely. I'm not mixing colours, I'm just going to use the one colour. and let that do its job as it needs to. Letting the highlight and shadow, I'm not complicating that. I do struggle with colour, I say this all the time, and I'm best off sticking with very simple colour schemes, you know, monochrome and so on, or analogous colours, which are monochrome is basically, if this was monochrome, I'd stick to this red violet for everything. I've chosen a green, which is actually, or greeny blue, which is a split complementary. Excuse me a moment, I need to blow my nose, I think. No, I'm okay. But it kind of works. But to this colour, you could go to reds or to the more purpley colours on either side. And it's what you call analogous colours. So ones that are directly opposite each other on the colour wheel are complementary. They work nicely together. They tend to make each other look a lot brighter. Almost, and if you get the right colour combination, the colours almost kind of vibrate as you look at them. But the colours that are on either side of the complementary colour, they're called split complementaries, and they're not as vivid or as vibratory as the strict complementary colour can be. Okay, so I do want to add something to these little gems there, and I know exactly what I'm going to do, because I'm going to reach down and I'm going to get my metallic paints here, my iridescent and metallic watercolours. These are the Paul Rubens set, and they work. I mean, you know, that's all we want, paints and things that work, aren't they? And they're lovely colours, I'll just show you. There's a couple in here I really don't like, but, you know, I'm never going to be happy with everything. But they really are lovely colours, so I'm just using one of the golds here. Just needs a bit more water, because I'm going to need to just touch the tip of my brush to add little drops of gold inside each of these little seeds. In fact, I could have perhaps done with running a really intense colour, you know, the Inktense colour I was using in there. So a saturated version of it, a darker one. But it is what it is, and it'll be fine. And if they run one into another, well, they run one into another. If I need to neaten them up with a black pen afterwards, I will. These are very tiny little spaces, so I'm not going to fuss around too much with them, because that would be a silly thing for me to do, possibly. Okay. I also thought here, while I'm doing this, it might be nice to add a drop of gold just on the tips of these leaves. That just brings gold elsewhere, so we haven't just got it on in the seeds. Look at that. How many times did I try to touch that leaf with the tip of the brush? You need a very light hand for this if you want to keep the dots really tiny. So you don't spread the hairs on the brush outwardly, really. That'll do. That one needs a little bit more there, I think. And then I also think that I may just pop a couple just coming out of the top there. And if I can, because I've got a lot here, is, you remember those stripes here? Just going to see if I can get some gold in there. Not too much. I've watered it down a fair amount, so it'll, hopefully it won't obscure the black too much. So that's that done. So the very last thing I'd like to do is, apart from put those paints out of the way, oh, they'll go there, is the green on these here is a bit insipid, but I'm going to look for a different green. I did have one. Where is it? This is Ionian green, which is more greeny. The aquamarine is more bluey. But I think that if I manage to get the right amount of this here, it'll just give me a different kind of green, a richer green, and they won't look so washed out, because I don't want things to look washed out here really. Where the aquamarine is darker, that will do a lot of the addition of shadow to these, hopefully. But I can always pick a little bit more up and drop it in here and there, just to give some shadow while it's still damp. Can't overwork this though, that's the important thing, because while it's wet you can overwork it, I think. So there we go. That's better, that's a better colour. I love the green aquamarine, but I think I just wanted something that looked a bit, perhaps an older kind of colour to go with the more vintagey feel of that purpley red, perhaps. And although the shell is a lighter tone of that purpley red, I'm happy for it to be a lighter tone, to be honest. So there we are, is that one. And this will be the last one. Should be fine just like that. So that's a bit better. Okay, and the last thing I'd like to do, tell you what, I say last thing, up here, these things at the top, I think they might need just that little bit extra colour on them, because they're looking a bit almost like they're ghostly or they don't belong. Don't want that, I want them to feel that they belong. So I'll tell you what as well, I'm not happy with the gold that I put here. Yeah, some of the ink is lifting, so you have to be careful. But I'm just going to lift that up. And there might be a bit of sparkle left there, but I can live with that, I think. Let me have a look. That'll be fine. So, yeah, that's better, because it looked a bit strange there. And the last thing I want to do, I did dig out my indigo, because I say indigo, I must probably actually do with my Payne's Grey. There we go. Payne's Grey in this set is a lovely bluish colour. It's a bluey grey, and I think it'll work really nicely just to pop some shadows in here and there. Now I don't want this terribly dark, but I need it dark enough so that when it dries it still shows up. But just to pop some shadow in, just to help to lift them up that little bit. Again, I'm just using my paper towel just to blot off any extra liquid there. I think actually the Payne's Grey has worked really nicely here, to be honest. Need a little bit more in there, perhaps a little bit more here. That'll be fine. And then I'm going to put some shadow underneath here, just to lift that up. And I could also go along the edge of the grass here, I think. Along here. sometimes is the most time consuming bit, and it's the fiddliest bit, and you're thinking, oh, why am I doing this? But it makes a difference. It's subtle, but it does make that difference. It helps with that sense of dimension. And I'm not brilliant at doing this. I'm not brilliant with brush and what have you. And I'm using my rule of to the left and underneath. So here I'm going to the left, and I will just blend the edge out just a teeny bit. Bear in mind, I know that it's going to dry lighter than it is currently. Here we'll need a bit of shadow, and in there we'll need that little bit of shadow under there. Again, I'm just going to use my brush a drier brush, just to move that colour around and just to blend the edges out so it's not a harsh line. Okay, underneath these I need to pop some shadow. That's a bit dark, but I'll go back and just, again, blend it out, ease it out a little bit. Here I need a bit there, a bit here, a bit in the base, and I will just use a damp brush just to, again, just blend that out a little bit, get some more colour to the left. The nice thing about this is that I can just go over the top of the pens here, pen lines. I don't need to worry too much about shifting the pen. I just need to be wary of the gold. So I've got that. So now it's just that last little couple of leaves that we need to put the shadow underneath. Ooh, and this one around this side. Like so. And then I need a little bit under the bottom of these here because they would be in shadow. On this side as well. And then my shell as well. And I will go inside the shell here and just add some shadow in the darker nooks and crannies, and where there's a reflected shadow there as well, just to make sense of it. And then I'm going to add little bits of shadow underneath each of these lines, so I can just follow the lines along and just add the shadow underneath them. Not adding any colour inside them. I could have added some pattern or textural patterns, like lines or whatever, but instead I've chosen to do this and keep it fairly light and airy there. It's a bit of a contrast to other places. So that there, as I put the materials I've used, is my, well, apart from the gold paint, is my Saturday morning warm-up art. Rest of the day, I've got laundry to finish. That's easy. Automatic washing machines, fantastic inventions. That's all I'm going to say. And load needs to come out, another one needs to come in, and then it's inking in colouring pages for everything. So thank you for joining me. I do hope that you found this interesting, useful, and something that you'll have a go at. It's not very big, it's not overwhelming. I do like, if I want to leave space, I do like to work in a corner almost. And then this space, well, what could you do with it? A quote, a sentiment, just leave it as it is. it is what it is, you know, and I like that. It's hard for me to leave open space, but I like that. Oh, you know the one thing we've got to do? Let's add my initials in. And it's July 2022. So I shall pop that there. And this will go into a sketchbook, I think, possibly. I want to find something else to do with these, you know. I could mount it as a greetings card and possibly send it to someone. I'll think about this now. This could be a kind of a giveaway, couldn't it? Little bits of my art. Let me think on that and how I could organise that. Anyway, take care, look after yourselves, and above all else, find time to be creative. Bye-bye for now.